Right, we're going live on Zoom.
Right.
Right, hello everyone, welcome, and thanks for joining us today. We're here to really take you out of the bubble that is our world of chaos of COVID-19 and hopefully bring you into a bit more of an exciting world and talk about the future and some other adventures through our series of web chats that we've been having recently. So usually we're focused on adventure and experiences outdoors. The last few weeks we've been focusing on expeditions. So we had a polar explorer with us last week, and next week we'll have our desert island survival. But this week we're focusing on the boardroom and in business. So many of you joining today I know are entrepreneurs and businessmen. And so we've got an ex-dragon with us, a fellow entrepreneur, who can also give us a great insight into a lot of the government stuff that's going on right now too. So please welcome Piers Linney. Hi, Piers.
Welcome. Not often I get called exciting, but I'll take that.
Well, thanks for joining us. What would be great today is to hear, I guess, about your career, I guess, to start with. See how you got where you are and learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it's useful to give a bit of context because people think I'm some like wise guy off TV, but I've done a bit more than that. So, and also I think it helps to understand if you get into a Q&A, I think we're going to do a bit of Q&A, is where I've sat on every side of that table. So I'll do the short version because I haven't got time for my whole life story. But I was I grew up in a Lancashire mill town, wanted to work in to be a lawyer. Everyone said, you know, you're crazy. After a long story, I managed to become a city lawyer. So I'm actually, believe it or not, a venture capital lawyer by training. So I qualified in the city, and I kind of left straight after. I had my first business when I was 13. I disintermediated my local news agent, bought papers from the wholesaler, delivered on a Sunday because he didn't. That's how I built my first business. And from then on, I always had businesses, whether it was selling that kind of knockoff kind of perfume when I was doing my A-levels. It wasn't knockoff, it was something that smelled similar to. University, I was doing like parties and stuff. Law school, I was doing company formation, always doing something on the side. They call them side hustles now. We also had one. And then I managed to get into the city. But as a lawyer, as a venture capital trainee lawyer, what I experienced were entrepreneurs on one side of the table and investors on the other side of the table. And this is kind of pre-tech, real tech and internet. It was more sort of mid-market VCs, and I wanted to be one of those two, not the person writing down what the hell they were talking about. So I kind of very quickly moved into the city in banking. So I managed, another long story, I found myself at what was then BZW, like Barclays Capital now. And that was acquired by that business by Credit Suisse. So I ended up being a pretty young investment banker in mergers and acquisitions at Credit Suisse, it was then Credit Suisse First Boston. So this kind of bold bracket global investment bank. And for me, it was kind of sink or swim. So I kind of learned about law, structuring, funds, venture, commercial law. I knew all of that. In banking, I learned about numbers, how you put these things together, how you value companies, how you analyze businesses, sectors, all quite high level, but I learned quite a lot. Then the internet came along, and I thought, well, hang on, this is like a gold rush. So if you look at the first internet wave, a lot of people we sort of know and read about, there were young bankers, management consultants, or they had the financial ability from wherever they came from to not work for a year and try a startup. So I kind of got my bonus. I thought I'm going to leave, set up my first startup in e-medicine, so the e-detailing. And I basically, when I left the building, everyone said, well, where are you going? They gave you a box, literally. And I said, well, I'm going to start an internet company. And I raised £700,000 leaving the building. Oh, how the world has changed.
Yeah.
That's what it was like. So I did that for a while. Luckily, unluckily, raised money in March 2000. So literally before the crash. Luckily though, my business partner's family had quite wealthy and they funded it through. And I moved on. So I ended up then in dance music, managing the world's biggest DJs, a record label, from Carl Cox to John Digweed. Did that for a while. Again, we sort of downsized. This is before iTunes, believe it or not. We were looking at doing custom burn CDs. It sounds like incredibly.
Days of CDs, hey?
Yeah, it sounds bonkers now, doesn't it? It's like inventing them before the wheel. And so I did that for a while. And then we raised some money. We had to downsize. I also made myself redundant. And I was sat at home thinking, what the hell do I do? I made a bit of money here, not a lot. It's more income based really. And I thought, well, what I need to do is find something find a niche. So I went off to Manhattan, had a few contacts there, and I learned about special purpose acquisition companies. These are cash shells that used to buy companies. Went off to Manhattan, got to know all the funds, tried to do one here, another long story, didn't quite get it away, lost a bit of money on that, but I lost quite a bit of money actually, but I learned from the funds what kind of deals they wanted to do. And in the US, some of you who maybe come from the US will understand that market. They're called private placement funds. So most equity that goes into small caps in the US comes from hedge funds, not what we used to hear, which is equity funds. So I got to know these funds, and they did more structured debt, structured equity. And I became a placement agent and an estate agent for cash. Made a bit of money that way. And all the time I was investing it in companies and startups and backing friends and entrepreneurs. But all the time I still had my side hustles. Yeah. And some of those grew to be quite big. And then one of them, it was actually a mobile phone business, which was about 300 people, 40 million in revenue, got to a reasonable size. And every board meeting, I thought management just aren't getting it, where we want to take this business. And I realized one day that even though I'm an expert in mobile, I can't do a worse job than management. So I actually stepped into the business. Now, this is one lesson in life, is that, you think that stepping into a 20-person, 200, 2,000-person company is hard work. It still boils down to the end of the day, the vision, where you want to take it, the destination compared to the point B compared to the point A. Having the right people below you. You never have more than 6 maybe direct reports.
Yeah.
Then it's an organizational structure. It doesn't really matter whether it's 20, 200, 2,000 or 20,000. I'd take on a 20,000 person business now, to be quite honest with you. If anyone actually wanted to hire me, that is. So I kind of learned the hard way. And what I learned as well in those businesses is that when it came to change, it was to change more than you thought you were going to change. And if you have to make cuts, cut deeper than you thought you had to cut. So I learned the hard way really about restructuring that business and turning it around. We sold that business to a public company. I started a cloud business, raised quite a bit of money. We deployed all of the communications for BAE Systems, Aviva, the government, lots of big deals. We won the tender at the back end for Vodafone. Great stuff. Fortunately, we ran out of money. So that was quite a painful learning lesson about debt, running out of money. We sold the business eventually, but it was put into an administration process. That was really quite painful. 120 people on your payroll, wondering what's going to happen. But they all survived that process and went on to do great things. So you can see that I kind of sat around every side of the table. And then I ended up on TV. I'm sure we'll come back and talk about that. And then more recently, I sat on the board of Nesta, which is the UK's largest innovation foundation. Very interesting organisation. You haven't looked at it. So we're education, everything, education to politics, government. It's about innovation. It's a £450 million endowment. And about 2 years ago, I joined the board of British Business Bank, which was a not particularly well known outside of government and the financing sector, government-owned bank. It's not really a bank actually. It's more of a conduit of funds into SMEs. And the idea behind the bank the idea originally was that it was to try and bridge that gap. After the last recession, 2008, that gap appeared, between equity and debt. SMEs couldn't find finance, and this was the mission really is to try and make access to capital easier for SMEs. Yeah. So as you can imagine, that's been a very interesting period to sit on the board of the bank. So we can come and talk about this, but all the things like the Future Fund, C-bills, that's all British Business Bank. So I've spent many hours over the last few weeks on board meetings discussing what's happening, what the government are planning to do and how to go about executing it. That's the public history of me.
Yeah, it sounds like you've definitely seen all sides of the table, which I guess...
I'm involved in startups, and I've been working today on a presentation to start a new business. So I'm still doing all of it, really.
Well, I guess that's the fun of it all, right? And I think that, I was going to say what kind of first led you to want to be an entrepreneur, but it sounds like you already were from the very beginning if you were selling newspapers as a kid and doing those deals. So often I might think that you've come through the banking sector and then had this moment of madness where you went, I'm going to leave it all behind and go do this. But it seemed like you already had that fire within you, I guess. Yeah, so what the paper ran, basically, I had £5 a week, doing 6 days a week. Well, this is rubbish. My dad said to me on Sunday morning, I don't want to get out of bed. And I'll come back to the lessons learned, don't worry. I don't want to get out of bed on a Sunday morning, go and get my papers because it didn't deliver. Here's £1
go and get my paper. I thought, hang on a minute, I'm doing £6 for the week, but that getting it's 50p maybe. Shares are all down. And I sort of said, well, there's an opportunity here. So I spoke to the neighbours saying, do you want me to get your paper? And they said, yeah, why not? Great idea. I fly the whole community. It's quite a small town I grew up in, Lancashire, an old mill town. I got maybe 30, 40 people said, yeah, great idea. So then I bought the papers off the local wholesaler, because there's no newsagent. He delivered a big bundle. You've seen the films, they throw a big bundle of papers. I got one of those out to my parents' house. And then I was doing it on my bike eventually. And then I was earning about, I think it was £20 on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
For a few more hours work. What I learned was actually that it's an entrepreneurial story, isn't it? It's about finding a niche, finding a product, market, finding the fit, work hard, because in those days when it snowed there, you couldn't see a car. Work hard, you couldn't get over that bit, it was hard work. Yeah. And at the end of it though, what I found was that I made money, and that gave me the freedom at the time to buy a very nice BMX. But what that is a micro way actually, it was about wealth creation. And I realized that by putting all that stuff together and working hard, I can't get over that, it gave me options and a bit more freedom. And that stuck with me.
Yeah, I guess that's that sign of achievement. If you set yourself your goal for that BMX and then you got it, then
it was a 400 quid BMX in 1987. it was a pretty nice BMX. Yeah.
Sounds like it. Well, I guess we're all focusing on which car we're going to get next, but the BMX is definitely on the list. So, I mean, with all those insights and all these businesses that you've started and sold out of, I guess there's been a few failures along the way, but as a lot of entrepreneurs say, and that's where you learn the most. So what has been your biggest failure? Tell us more.
Well, I've got several of them with a whole different webcast on that, to be honest with you. But,
yeah, I know when we were talking earlier, you said this.
Yeah, I mean, the one I mentioned was the cloud business. I mean, that was 120 people. I probably lost £1.5 million myself, lots of other people's money, my friends' money. But at the end of the day, we worked very, very hard. We did what we could, and there's nothing else I could do. Even my friends that put £800,000 into that, they backed other things because they could see that they get it. That was the most difficult one because it was kind of public as well. I found it very hard. But the point about it is being an entrepreneur, and this is what I think the UK lacks sometimes. We miss this sometimes. It's much more accepted just naturally in the US. Is that being an entrepreneur is like being a scientist. You have a hypothesis and you want to go and test it. So you go out there and you test it. Does this work? And that's the product market fit. So you test an hypothesis. Some work, some don't. And in science, it's not a failure. It's just research proved your hypothesis was incorrect. You move on to the next one. And business is the same. I think entrepreneurs here, it should not be because if you're afraid of failure, you're going to be afraid of testing the hypothesis and taking people with you on the journey who can, let's face it, lose money. So it's about whether it's your mum, and I talk about the concentric rings where you get your money from. Starts with people that know you, moves out to private equity eventually. So it's about knowing people who are investing money, time, effort, energy, whatever it might be, value, that they know the risks, they understand the risks. But that shouldn't stop you from trying and testing the hypothesis. Now, you should always go and check, obviously, that you're not completely bonkers in terms of what the hypothesis is, and it's got some chance of success. And that's where it comes into pitching and formulating and doing your homework. But if you've done that and you believe in it, you should try. And you will have failures. You're in business. I know lots of people in business, and most of my friends that have done very well for themselves, it's business number 3, 4 sometimes. One was a disaster, 2 was a disaster, 3 they did okay, sold it, made a bit of money, but they learned from that. And what you hear the phrase the serial entrepreneur. And why do you get serial entrepreneurs? Because you learn from your mistakes. So you learn along those journeys that what you shouldn't do and what you did wrong. And what that means is that you've got your path of least resistance is more obvious than it might have been.
Yeah,
I mean, I've had many investments that I've invested in. I haven't worked out, and you can see sometimes where almost as the ink is drying on the check, the wheels fall off. I mean, imagine if you invested your life savings in a hospitality business in January.
Yeah, exactly.
This is.
Who could have predicted this? Exactly.
But this is what builds economies and creates value. I think, especially in the UK, post-COVID and Brexit, it's down to us to pick things up and put the economy back together again.
Well, and I guess talking about kind of the failures, the crazy ideas, it kind of brings me on to some thoughts of some madcap ideas I've seen in the den, certainly. And I mean, just for everyone watching as well, we are going to do a Q&A later. So if you want to, the chat there, you can send some questions in as we're going along, and we'll aim to answer some of those at the end, because I know that it's definitely interesting to talk about the den and how that was for you. And I think that, so like, what's it like being a dragon? Is there real tension between the other dragons in the den? Can you give us a bit of insight to that?
The den was an interesting one for me, because I did the Secret Millionaire in 2011. Also, my friend said, wow, you really did keep that secret. Especially my wife at the time as well. So I kind of was asked to do these things because of my profile. And there aren't many people that look like me that came with my background, really, that have that kind of profile. So BBC asked me, I kind of said, yeah, okay, why not? And they asked me twice. Now, there's a good story to that. So, and this is all completely true. When the BBC asked to do it, I wasn't sure. And I just basically donated some money to Virgin Unite. So I went off to Ulusaba with Sir Richard Branson and Holly and the kind of the team out there. So I'm in Ulusaba, sitting on this sort of rock. Have you been there?
Yeah.
Sitting on that rocky outcrop at the bar, looking at these like impala being chased by lions, quite metaphorical. I kind of thinking, and the BBC kept ringing me. I'm not making any of this up. They were ringing me saying, are you going to do it or not? We need to know. We need to make a decision. You know, we want you involved, blah, 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 the sales pitch. And I said, who can I talk to that understands media, business, the interaction between the two, how it might impact you, your personal, all this stuff. I thought, pretty flipping obvious. So I asked Richard, I go, have a chat. He goes, you all right? I go, have a chat. So he sits down, you probably know the tables at the back of the bar, overlooking the back of the Ulusaba, sat down there with 2 Coronas, again, saying, yeah, what do you think? And he gave me this kind of quite a long talk about the power of TV, even compared to social media, how back in the day, he'd get on a plane for a decent news spot. He said, you know, you don't want people like you on TV, you'd be good at it, you'd enjoy it. The media may go through your bins, you know, but expect that. They'll go through your personal life, but that comes with the territory. But, you know, in the way it adds profile, you can also monetize that. Let's be real about it. And I said, okay, yeah, I agree, I'll do it. He goes, right, okay, go on then. I said, well, thank you very much. He goes, no, go on then. I said, what do you mean? He goes, pick up your phone, ring them back now. I said, you too? He goes, yes. So I had to ring the producer back and say, I'm sat here with Sir Richard Branson. He said I should do it, so I'm in. He said, okay, thank you. I put the phone down. He said, pat on the shoulder, said, well done, and walked off. Yeah. That's my story of how I ended up in Dragon's Den, which I have to say is a pretty good one.
I love hearing that. And I know that been lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time with Richard, and yeah, being around him. And
like, isn't it? That's what he's like. You know, spirit, basically. I said that to me, as you can imagine. So when I got there, literally the first day, was makeup, in the set, sit down. I met Kelly Hoppen, the first time ever, met everyone outside the green room, sat in a chair, tested the lights. It took a while, and then boom, that was it. Off to the races. And it was quite surreal, actually, to think you sort of sat there doing it. But eventually, I also just get into it and get on with it. Yeah. And it was a great experience. It's opened doors for me. It's closed doors. People sometimes, you know, I try and be thinking of myself as a serious ex-professional business person. People think, you're idiot off TV. You can get that sometimes. I think dealing with celebrity, BBC called me a reluctant celebrity. I wasn't going to the opening of every fridge door or every film premiere. It just didn't really interest me. Although now I wish I had. I don't get the invites anymore, so now I wish I had. So it's kind of like, so that was interesting, actually. The personal side of it was sometimes quite difficult. But overall, I enjoyed it. And we can talk about this, you know, the experience of the investments there. But I think Dragon's Den, it's very, very hard to do business on TV. So you might see, you know, Kitchen Nightmares or things like that, or, you know, Undercover Boss. But it's very hard to do business on TV because you and I both know that, you know, it's most of the details boring. And if it's not interesting, people are going to switch off and watch Gogglebox. So the example I give is that sometimes you might see on Dragon's Den where we won't invest because the investor, she started crying, or we didn't like the brand, or they didn't know their numbers. That's not really the case quite often. You know, they're there for an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. right? You see 12
What, per
minutes.
pitch?
Well, if you think about it, if you walk out, do a pitch, what is it, a few minutes, there's 5 dragons, they'll ask a few questions. Say at the minimum, you get 10 minutes from each dragon. That's an hour just before you start. So if you start getting into detail and negotiations are real. So the den is, if it's interesting and the tube, if you're not interested, you just take the mickey out of it, and you just you try and do it within. There's all a bit of camaraderie. But if there's more than one person interested, it is competitive in real life. But the point is that kind of, it's a showcase really for that process. So we might not invest because they pitched to us that we wanted to invest in a franchise, in a subsidiary of a Canadian company that's licensed a Paraguayan company's intellectual property. And they're like, that makes no sense. Why would you ever invest whatsoever? Goodbye. But on TV, they'll say, Piers Linney's not investing because he keeps crying. So they've got to make it real. Now,
yeah,
they do stick within the sort of journalistic, bounds of what they're supposed to. But I think it shows the entrepreneurial process, whether you're big or small, actually, of whether it's pitching to a private equity fund or your mum and dad, about the process of taking the hypothesis, that business, that idea, presenting it well, and getting people to buy into your vision and to back it. So that's an important lesson. I think that's really helped people could see that.
yeah.
But it's the best format so far, or maybe I'm working on my own, out there that kind of encapsulate business, and it's very hard to do.
Well, I mean, I guess when you came in, obviously, and you were the junior dragon, as it were, I guess, so it meant that you wouldn't always get the deals, even if you offered the same deals. So yeah. What's the business that got away? Is there one that you're like, wish I got that?
So I think, so this first point, I think you're right. At first, people used to walk in the den, I could see it, and they were pitching, and they weren't pitching to me.
Yeah.
I've been the guy. But eventually, I think when you got more, some of the producers, they're not stupid. They realised that we need to find businesses that can be interested in dragon personalities. And I think you started seeing more tech companies. So they're more apps, software, companies that were, every company uses tech now, but these were sort of technology driven. And I think generally, those businesses were pitching to me because they knew I'd probably get it. Now, I think that over time that changed. As people began to know me and they saw me on TV, it kind of began to sort of pan out. And obviously, some of the dragons had a bigger profile; they were more famous, I suppose. So people wanted them to invest. But I think the junior dragon part didn't last for very long. What was your question again? I've forgotten the last question.
Yeah, which one got away though? Was there
so,
a deal
on that, so the point is, I think when you invested many times, you don't really worry about the ones that got away.
Yeah.
I think you get over that. I think if you're just starting out and you missed, I don't know, you missed Facebook, and then you might miss WeWork. Just depend when you got in and when you got out. Right. So you don't really worry about that. There wasn't a company. There was one actually that's done quite well since, which was Grip It, little fixings. Like a 17-year-old invented this fixing that goes in the wall. If you've got a stud wall and there's a big piece of metal behind it. And I didn't invest because I couldn't get excited by it, but I knew he was a great entrepreneur. He had a great business. I could see it could actually create some value, but I just couldn't get excited about wall fixings. So that's why I didn't do it in the end.
I mean, I guess that's the thing, right? As an entrepreneur, you've got to be really passionate about the stuff that you're getting involved in, and often you've got so many new businesses and ideas and things to focus on. So I guess that's part of that story, is focusing on the things that you enjoy. So I mean,
I used to do things to make money, still do to some extent, but now when I get involved in new things, you probably see one of the ventures I'm involved in now, there are things that interest me. I don't have to be super passionate about it, but I've got an interest in it. Some I am passionate about. Like I've got a mountain biking company, Atherton Bikes, things like that.
Well, after all your BMX goals that you
now I'm in 3D printed titanium mountain bikes that have won world championship races. So I've done full circle now.
All those paperboy hours were worth it.
Now I'm too old to ride them. About breaking bones, the problem. But the point is now, so I've got to have an interest. The key thing really is the people. So I've had businesses and been involved in things where I've kind of got involved. I like it to probably make money, but the people I won't use any expletives, but there's a bit of a tricky or didn't like them really. And I don't do that anymore really. It's more about people. I think as you get older, you can realise you've got to spend quite a lot of time with these people. You may as well enjoy it. So I think the business proposition, yes. And in Dragon's Den, really, let's face it, in any small young business, even startup to some extent, you are investing in the founders, because it's highly unlikely the business they started with is going to be the one they finish with, end up with the one they sell. It might be in the same sector, it might be very similar, but the operational model, the people, it's all going to change. So you want to be confident and think, can I work with these people? And are they the ones that can actually generate a return for me, even if I have to completely pivot? So, and then the more of a startup it is, the younger it is, the more it's about the Dragon's Den, you're investing in people.
Well, I think that's your great takeaway, right? It is about the people, because the business often changes. And I mean, but have you, with all those stories of the Den, was there a success story you took out of it? Is there a business that...
So Dragon's Den is interesting. It's a real, I study portfolio theory. So I think it was probably 12 investments, like shook hands. I think 9 probably happened. I think none of them have gone out of business yet, although I think one's probably drifting towards that. Quite a few I got out of, but I kind of got my money back, to be honest with you. But the big success for me, the one that returned the fund, if you look at it from a venture point of view, was Wonderbly, which was called Lost My Name. So this is where I'm sitting in the Den, 4 Israeli PhDs walk out with a term sheet from a reasonably well-known startup venture capital fund. So I knew someone had done some due diligence. I could see that. And they basically have created, some of you got children, some of you might have these. They're basically personalized children's books. It was called Lost My Name. That was the most famous one. The biggest seller now is one called Where's, like Piers. And it's a bit like Where's Wally. You go and find yourself all these characters in these like crazy environments. So that's done really, really well. So Google invested in that. They invested about, I think they raised about another $12 million. It's probably, I've seen recent numbers, about 30 million in revenue. It's profitable. It's probably the leader in the world. What's it worth? I don't know. The last valuation was tens of millions, over 50. So I've done quite well out of that, and I've sold a few points, and that paid for my Dragon's Den.
There you go.
So I've probably done okay from that perspective. But if it wasn't for that one, I probably would have lost money, because those 50s on the table, the top few are real. The rest is
that was another question of mine that's burning.
What's amazing about Dragon's Den is, even when you're there and you're in that set, which is a set, and you know the kind of wheel you turn on the pipe, for example, until you literally get this close to it and tap it, you wouldn't know that it isn't real.
Yeah.
What the set designers do is amazing. Like even in the lift, which is not a lift, it's static. They just show video clips of the movements in a lift, in an elevator. Even in there, where the trolley over the years has scraped the side of the wall and it's all rusted, that's all paint. So the Den, it looks great on TV. It's a fake environment, but the 50s basically down the side, and the 50 you wouldn't know it in the old 50s. There's a little pink bit of ink. When they pile them up, you see a big stripe of ink. That's just painted on blank paper. So I'm giving the secrets away now.
You can't reveal.
Never hire me again, the BBC. But
your NDA is invalid now.
It was amazing the way they put this thing together, made it real, and you learn that people just fall for TV. People believe that's all, because you're now programmed to accept it.
Yeah, I mean, so with the Den, like, how did that affect how people saw you? I know that you said people didn't think you look like an entrepreneur, and what do you mean?
So there's two sides to that coin. So one is, okay. So the way I look at it, the way I try to explain it is that what TV does is create a caricature of you. So I'd meet journalists, and I'd have lunch with them in some restaurant, and I'd come outside, and there'd be some Maybach outside with a driver standing there, and they'd be kind of like, "Is it your car?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? I came here on a bike." and then when I go to places, they're like, expect me to ride in a helicopter with a security team to sweep the room. And that's just so not me, but how much money I've got. So people have this perception of you that Dragon's Den builds up. That's not really me, and sometimes that can be useful because it can open doors. I'm being completely honest. But other times, I spend too much time explaining that that's not me at all. So overall, it's a positive, but it's something that you have to manage. And also people, they can begin to, you know, blow smoke up the proverbial when there's no need to.
Yeah. I mean, do you think you want to ever return to TV, or is that the last you'll see of you on
I
that?
would do TV, so I probably wouldn't, got to be careful what I say. I don't know whether, so I've done 2 programs where I sit there and write checks. That's a typical kind of TV. The TV I've done has been quite, they want you to look good, I suppose. So it's not really high risk in that way. I would do things that are into like documentaries, things that interest me, things I'm interested in, like small business. I think, you know, Dragon's Den, the next phase would be quite interesting. I'd love to do a similar format on sort of social media. I think having that format locked into TV is a bit old school these days, but it's quite a hard thing to crack. So I'm always looking at things. I get asked to do random stuff like, you know, dancing on ice or Strictly Come Dancing or.
How's your dancing skills?
I probably do the jungle if they ask me, just for the hell of it. Just so you could laugh at me. I have to go to the gym though. So probably do something like that. But I think I'd love to do another TV business program. But as I said before, it's quite hard to structure those formats.
Yeah. I mean, moving on to kind of unfortunately, the real world and where we all are right now. But you've got quite a bit of an insight into the way that the government supports small and large business from your involvement there. I mean, maybe you can give us a bit of insight into what your involvement was with that, and then we can go on to talk about how that.
So yes, I don't take any credit for structuring anything or making things happen. I'm a non-executive director. I'm on the board of British Business Bank. So as I explained earlier, British Business Bank is the government-owned, it's not actually a bank in the regulatory, but it's a business-owned entity where they channel all the funding to small businesses. So whether it's enterprise capital funds, debt investment, money's gone into Funding Circle, they put money into British Patient Capital, 2.5 billion. They probably facilitated it's over 12 billion. I think post-COVID, given the schemes we've been working on, which I'll mention in a minute, that's going to come in the tens of billions. So there's a existing scheme called the Enterprise Finance Guarantee. And the idea was that if a SME couldn't quite get a loan because it was a security issue in terms of its assets or personal security, they could get a guarantee from the government. That was called EFG. And the EFG's been kind of, that platform has been, that framework has been used to create C-bills. So that's the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. There's CL bills for bigger companies. And now there's what they've called a bounce back loan, which is kind of C-bills to small companies. So what we've seen in the bank is the bank's a separate legal entity. It's owned by the government. So the bank kind of provides, it's a centre of excellence, providing feedback of what the market needs. You've got the government and the Chancellor, they've got their political agendas, obviously, about what they think they need to do. And that's coming the other direction. And then you've got all as you can imagine, you've got the likes of the CBI, the venture capital community, the FSB, all these lobby groups. So everyone shall look after their own. And to be fair, I think that given where we are in the time and what they've come up with, there's a reasonable number of schemes to cover the market. The issue is that, and I see on social media a lot where I have to sort of, I want to tweet stuff but I can't, is that if you try and create something completely new in financial services, like a venture capital fund to invest equity in companies, it'll take a year to do it, and it takes 6 months to make an investment. It doesn't work. Debt, you can't completely reinvent a wheel. So the use frameworks are already there. In the future fund, they're using a convertible loan note that needs matching, so that kind of simplifies the process. Now, over time, in reasonably short order, I don't have complete insight because the Chancellor really, they may tweak these schemes. So the future fund, for example, is a convertible loan note. It doesn't really work for EAS. A lot of young companies clearly have equity investors use EAS as the main incentive to invest. It doesn't work for them. It only works for venture-backed businesses. So hopefully that may be expanded to allow for EAS. I'll expand that again. But sadly, there will be companies that they can't raise debt. They aren't really raising equity. They can't really furlough lots of staff. A lot of hospitality businesses, you'll be familiar with lots of these, they're going to fall through the cracks and they're going to suffer. And I think that the government's now getting to the point where, we're going to war here, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. We've done what we can. Put it out there. Let me know what you think the casualty count is going to be. And that's kind of the grim reality where we are. what I say to businesses is that these things are changing over time, but most small companies, they can't survive more than 2 payrolls. And we're kind of getting there now. So you need to look at what's available. Don't just completely hang out for something that's going to change. And then take action, make changes and take action. If you can mothball, but don't expect a bailout, because the government couldn't, from a fiscal perspective, afford to bail everybody out. I don't think. I don't have that complete insight. We can imagine the numbers we're talking about here. When you think about this, aimed at 1,000 SMEs in the UK that might work for the new bounce back. If they lend up to 50k per business and they lose all of that, the 100% guarantee, that's coming from the taxpayer or the government borrowing money from the markets. You do the math. That's a very, very large number.
I mean, yeah, a lot. Like obviously, as you say, the government have managed to put this in place in a very short period of time. So hopefully, it's robust. And
well, the government they have the ideas. A business bank team has to execute it. So you can imagine that. I mean, it's so fluid. You know, we're talking about one thing, and then there'll be more pressure to change it, and it'll change. So the implementation is the important bit in many ways. The idea is as cheap as we want to, you know, but doing their piece, it's about the implementation, because, and there's been lots of feedback about, you know, is it slow? But at the end of the day, the loan scheme is operated by the banks.
Well, this seems a big criticism. Right? A lot of the banks weren't loaning the money, and even with the 80% backing from the government, it seemed that a lot of those loans haven't gone through. And I'm aware of businesses around us that have applied for those and haven't received a loan. So
I think that's why they've had to bring in the new one. I think that's probably why it suddenly went up from 25k to 50k, so it covers more ground, because lots of small companies, you know, 25k, even a decent sized company, won't get you very far if you've got any kind of payroll. So I think you've seen them kind of iterate and change them to try and make it broader. But the point is this, I say to you, so if someone said to you, would you invest money out there where there's an 80% government guarantee willy-nilly? You wouldn't, because they've still got a 20% risk. And because the scale of it, the actual number, aggregate number, is quite a big number. So I think that with the 100% guarantee, the banks still have to, you know, technically go and try and recover those monies, but they can claim the guarantee. But when you get under 25k, you get into personal finance regulation. So there's a lot of moving parts need to be changed. There's state aid, which I won't even begin to bore you with, but there's state aid, there's the size of loan can mean that you have to like a mortgage, you have to go for a full audit of someone's affordability. With this new scheme, they won't. And let's face it, at the end of the day, you will have fraud. There'll be a lot of people that claim this loan that probably shouldn't be, and then the government is going to take it on the chin that's just the cost of doing it.
I mean, so how do you think business is going to change after this situation? What do you think some of the biggest impacts of COVID is really going to be on the business world longer term?
So I think it'll be. I think humans have short memories, but I think over long term, it'll sort of find its level again. But I think, and like we're doing now, so I spent years trying to push video conferencing, unified communications, and deploy it into big organisations, small, and no one liked doing video. It was like, what's behind me? Is my hair right? They felt subconscious. That the eye contact thing was a bit weird. I think now you'll find that this is why Zoom share price has gone through the roof. You'll find that people are going to be more willing to use this kind of technology. And once it happens, that changes a lot in terms of how you manage people, where they work, whether you need office space. I'm not sure, I hope no one listening is in office space, but I think there'll be an impact on the demand for office space, whether how long that lasts, who knows. People are going to start thinking, I have, about how you run your life. So I start thinking about, do I need to travel to London? I'm in the northwest of the UK at the moment. Do I need to travel to London all the time? I've lived for 20 years, but I'm kind of up here at the moment. Do I have to travel there all the time, or can I do this more? Should I be spending a small fortune on a very large cup of cow's milk with an espresso in it, in a single-use plastic container? And you start thinking, I think people start to realise that although they may be furloughed and maybe not getting paid the full salary, they're probably better off. And I think the community angle is an interesting one. I think so. How people work, where they work. I think the thing that work is something you do, not somewhere you go, and that will change dramatically. I think there'll be things like going to the gym. So I'm quite lucky actually. I've built a whole gym here, so I can get on with it.
I can tell.
I think yes, subscriptions, things like that, I don't know. And again, people have got short memories. They like to get out of the house and do things, but I think there'll be an impact in sectors like that. Hospitality is an interesting one. I think, and actually I'm working on a new business today actually, which is in the prepared food sector, which I've been in unsuccessfully, hasten to add. But now with the same founder, we're now looking at the game because of all of this, got some new ideas, and the market's evolving in various ways in logistics and technology. How do we go about doing that again? Because I think that, the need to go out and buy, this is why Amazon, most things in Amazon I try and buy, and I say, you can't have this because it's not necessary. It's like, what? So I think retail will change. I think all it's going to do at the end of the day is accelerate what technology was bound to do anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess people will be, so that's where people's focus is going to be going forward, is the speed of change, and hopefully that's just increased that speed. So it could be some good investment opportunities, I guess.
Yeah, I think it will be. In those, I mean, it's not hard to work out where it is, but again, I think you'll get you get the sort of the herd mentality. There'll be a huge interest in video technology companies, delivery companies, and then it'll probably plateau, and then it'll fade a bit. But I think the water level is going to be a lot higher than it was pre-COVID.
Yeah. Well, thanks for some of your amazing insights. I know we've got quite a few questions, so I'll hop onto those and we'll see where we go. So who's been your biggest influence in business? Who's helped you be successful? And who's been your rock alongside you?
I get asked a lot, and I don't really have one, sad to say. So I kind of, where my background is, I kind of bumbled along and worked things out as I went along. I had some people working as a lawyer that are still sort of mentors today in a way. People who worked in the city and banking who are still friends, who are more senior than me, I learned from. So I always went for to learn from people that were more senior and better than I was. That's something I always did. The entrepreneur I always looked up to really was Sir Richard Branson, because he's the only one I could actually, honestly. Now, I'm a bit of a history bore, believe it or not. So I do look back to the George Stevenses and Barking and Brunels, the Carnegie, the JP Morgan. I can go on forever about those personalities that interested me and I read about and I understand what they did at the time. But today, really, it's about Sir Richard Branson, really. Now, mentor-wise, my ex-chairman in a couple of businesses was Sir Ken Alissa. So he's the Lord Lieutenant for Greater London. So he's the guy that you see, he's kind of mixed race guy you see in a suit and a sword that looks after the royal family whenever they're entertaining in London. He's the guy that should have opened the car door for Meghan Markle. That's Sir Ken. And Sir Ken's amazing. He's grew up in a two-down house in Nottingham. He's now Sir, he's the Lord Lieutenant of Greater London. He's ex-IBM sort of sales. Been my chairman. He's been a consultant. He's a great mix of personalities that has sort of, guided me. He will say, try to guide me through, some good and some bad situations.
I mean, I guess, but yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs need to find someone to look up to, but also have advisors on their board. And I think a lot of people kind of find it a struggle to do that. And with your businesses, do you get an advisory board put together with a lot of your companies when you started them? How did that find itself initially?
One thing I'd say is that I think entrepreneurs are far better off talking to entrepreneurs. I think you can have advisory boards, and I've kind of had them as well, where there's people that clearly they spent their whole life in an industry, right? No matter how clever you are, you can never replicate that because the insights, the networks, it takes 20 years to build these things up. So that's worth having on board, having access to. But I find that entrepreneurs talking to people who haven't been through that process, having that experience in terms of especially making decisions is a mistake. I think on any advisory board, you want people that understand what it is you're going through.
And then, so a couple of people are asking about how we can, I guess, make the most of the COVID situation. Where's the opportunities? What sectors would you invest in? How, as an entrepreneur, can you find an opportunity at this current time?
Like I was saying earlier, I think that, there are things like, things are going to change. So my view of COVID is really, it's going to, over time, is accelerate where we think technology was going anyway. So whether it's the way hospitality works, whether it's talk about my stuff I'm involved in, whether it's food delivery, whether it's not going to the gym and getting on a Peloton bike, delivery generally, all these things, video conferencing are opportunities. But it will kind of take off the interest, plateau, then dip again. So everyone will get excited, but the world, the water level will eventually begin to settle to where it kind of was pre-COVID to a degree. So I wouldn't get too excited and go and throw your money at the first video conferencing company that comes through the door. So that's one issue as well. But I think another thing about investing now is I think that now is about a time to do the research and plan and look and have those conversations, but just wait, because we don't. Metaphor I've been using, good or not, is that it's like being behind a wave that's loading into a beach. We don't really know how high it is, and we can't see how far away the beach is. But eventually, when that crests, whether it's economically or in terms of infections of a coronavirus, and you can see over it and see the shore, you can begin to plan about what's going to happen, how long it's going to take, what the impact's going to be. So I'd kind of keep your powder dry really until that day comes. And if you've got a small business, it's about surviving until that day, even if it means mothballing, because then you can start to plan with more accuracy. Trying to plan cash flow now, I mean, you're sticking your finger in the air.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually in B2B, I've got friends that are in businesses that are, they're killing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's a lot of businesses right now are saying what action they should take, but there's no clear vision about how we're going to come out of this. So that's the problem.
You see in Germany now, I don't know what the latest update is. They see that they try to relax restrictions, and then the infection case, the number of infections have gone up again. If that happens, people are going to be more cautious. So this is going to go on for a lot longer. I mean, they have cancelled Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
You can see why. They've got to market it now, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But this is not going to. This is not a 3-week, 2-week thing. It's going to go on forever. We're talking about whether vaccines work, whether you can get it again. This is not going to be over by the end of the summer.
Yeah, I think that's the scary thing, and I think that people need to really understand that in business. And a lot of corporates are being very cautious, obviously, but it's and especially in the events industry. I mean, a lot that also scares consumers a little bit, because they think that maybe these things happening in October, November, December might still have some restrictions on. But then also a lot of the reasons why they're cancelling is because some of these events take 3-4 months to construct. Or the sales cycle.
Yeah, and the sales cycle as well. I mean, you're not lucky. You're obviously a business genius, because you're lucky in your business. You have a team, but you can concertina that and use it and outsource as well. So in some ways, I think that's what you're going to see as well. So long term, I was a trustee of Nest that did a little bit of research on the future of work and employment. So long term, organisations don't want employees because they're fixed costs. They want us all to be variable costs. So within my working life, especially my children, the gig economy is coming for all of us. And I think COVID, going back to your earlier question, that's just going to accelerate that, because now you can hire talent anywhere. I use designers in the Philippines and various projects sometimes, and that's going to happen now, where the pressure for human labor, human resources to become a variable cost will rise.
Well, I think that's another great takeaway, the gig economy, and how that will certainly increase and change. One last question, and a good one to end on. It's so what's your kind of, I guess, your values around investing? Would you get into business and get rich with something you had zero passion in? What do you have a value set around what you invest in these days? Now I guess you've got the opportunity to go, look, I'm successful, I'm stable at where I am. I don't necessarily need to do things that I'm not that passionate about. But is that where you stand, or?
It depends, doesn't it? So it depends how you're investing. If you're investing personally, it depends on your mindset. Or you're investing as a co-invest with your friends, then you need some kind of structure, policy, sector, stage. You kind of need some kind of structure that can dictate where you invest. And again, I've got a YouTube channel as well, so feel free to join. But I've got a video there about these concentric rings of investors. So when you have that mad idea in the shower and you run downstairs, you go, "Mum," and she goes, "Oh, I'll give you £1,000, get on with it." And then as you move out, it's your friends, and it's friends of friends, then it's kind of angels, and it's venture. And the further you move out, the more questions they ask, the more risk there is, the bigger numbers you're talking about, and the more structure you need. So I tend to be in the sort of close to the middle. I don't really get involved in venture, either directly or indirectly, really, through funds. So I'm in the middle. So often I'm still very focused on the founders. If you move right out to the edges and you've got a global PE fund buying out a utility company, the whole management team could fall under a bus in Monday morning. It doesn't matter. The cash flows carry on, the business carries on, and life carries on. They've got to replace them, and it's all very sad, clearly. If in a younger company, the management team don't gel or fall out or just prove to be useless or just lose interest in things I've seen, which is quite amazing actually, then you've got a major problem. So I'm kind of down there. So I'm looking at things that are interest me, that I have some understanding about, so I can make a more, I can take a better view in terms of the risk. But then it's very much about, do I want to work with these people for potentially usually the next 10 years? I spoke to a guy the other day that my foray into dance music in 2002, when that business eventually got broken up, I helped out the radio business. And we're now the largest producer of syndicated DJ radio shows in the world. And that's 2003. I'm still chatting to him on the phone every day, right? How's it going? So these relationships can go on for 10 years. I think now as they grow, like I'm investing in Wonderby, I mentioned earlier, and they've got a team and a bigger business, they don't need me. They never need my input at all. I become more of I sit down the cap table. But sometimes what happens is things blow up again and you have to get involved. So it's very hard to get involved, even if you've got a financial interest, I find, if you think the people you're talking to are just talking nonsense or ignoring you or think they know best. So I'm naturally a shoot from the hip kind of guy, as you might have gathered, but I've been programmed in a way through being a lawyer and an ex-banker that I can go through a contract that's thick and show the lawyers the errors. I can write a financial model that will incredibly complicated. I can do all that stuff. So I've got this useful mix of kind of entrepreneurial impetus, but with the professional analytics.
Well, Piers, I just want to thank you so much for today. I think it's great to get your insights. I know you've there's a few talks you might have coming up with some of our corporate clients in the future, and I think it's great to hear about your Dragon's Den time and your thoughts on the current situation. So really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me, Johnny.
All right, well, you're welcome. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye, guys.